Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening, particularly those of you who haven't been with us before. Hopefully you'll enjoy yourself this evening and come back again. Our first speaker is, in my opinion anyway, possibly the greatest ambassador for Irish motorsport. She's competed in and won rallies and races all over the world, and she continues to help and promote motorsport events. Of course, the one and only Rosemary Smith. And hopefully we can get her microphone to work. Now, you're in business. Let's try that.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. 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 Oh. That little car, believe it or not, was a car I drove in 1965, 66, 67, EDU 710C. And I still own it. It lives here in Ireland, and I bring it around to a lot of shows and a lot of do's and a lot of little rallies. I mean, not really competitive rallies, but the car now is probably better than it was in those days, because we have new parts. I mean, they're you know, the same as the old parts, except they're new. And instead of the rear wheels falling off, which they used to do every short while, and they'd pass me out going down the road, because donuts, they sort of came, now don't ask me, I'm not very technical minded, but I knew these things were called donuts, and I was expecting it to be something I'd have for lunch or dinner, but anyway, they were parts of the car, and they used to fall off regularly, and you'd have to go off down and collect them over the hedge of the ditch, and then you came back up and sort of stick it on the back of the car. And but this is the same car. We found the remains of it, is all I'd say, in about 8 years ago in a garage in the south of England, and we weren't even sure whether it was the correct car or not. But somebody had said this man used to have a works, like the Ruth's dealership, and works cars, and they thought this might be one of them. So a very nice young man from Scotland, Clark Dawson, he knows more about me than I know about me, but he is, I mean, he's young, he's in his 40s, 50s, whatever it is, and he said, I want to get a car, a works car back, and then I will do it for you. I will restore the car. So we went everywhere. We actually went to over to France, we went to Germany, we went all over the place. And then eventually this man, Paul Birch, he got in touch with us and he said, I think it might be the car, but I'm not very sure. And we went across, and well, I went from Ireland, Clark came down from Scotland. But we looked at this little car, and I mean, I wouldn't know, because, I mean, to me it was just a car with 4 wheels and an engine in the back, and when you had no 4 wheels and no engine, I had no idea, except that it was the shape of an imp. And Clark found the tax disc on the wall of this place. And he said, this is your car, EDU 710C. And the man said, if you're going to use it, you know, take it out and actually rally it or put it into shows, whatever it is, you can have the car. So he gave me the car for nothing, which I thought was really nice of him. And I mean, I was absolutely chuffed about that, because I had no money anyway. And then Clark restored it totally and completely. And then the following year, I was asked to put it into a show called Stoneleigh, which was just 2 weekends ago in England. And I was to drive it. And they had a special stage, and they brought Russell Brooks and all these various people. And this is the first showing of the car. Then I had problems with my heart, and I had all these heart stents put in, and the cardiologist said, no, you're not to go out there, and you're not to go trying to race the car or do any of these things. So I asked the man who'd given me the car if he would like to drive the car in Stoneleigh. And he was so chuffed, and he got his licence back, and he got his overalls, and he got everything. And I think, as it turned out, he was probably last or second last. But it just, he had such a wonderful time, and it was the only way that I could sort of thank him for giving me the car and that sort of thing. And I thought, you know, it was just wonderful. But it's here now. It's going into a show on Tuesday in the RDS, and then it's going into another show about 2 weeks later. And you know, it's we use it all the time. We might do, but they're not serious sort of rallying events. It's only bringing it out. And the Dunboyne Club, which they started because Dunboyne in Dublin used to have a race, fantastic race around the streets in Dunboyne and around, and they have restored it now to the state. Now you only go quite slowly. I mean, you might only get up to 120 now and again, but if an imp went at 120 miles an hour, I think every queen would fly off it anyway. But anyway, it's there, and I've been using it quite a lot. It's just wonderful, and it's 50 years. This year it is 50 years old. And I'm only 29, so I don't know how I drove it. Sorry, I waffled a bit. Don't worry about it.
Actually, I think that that was actually at Dunboyne. That's actually at Dunboyne. That's you won the 1965 Tulip rally. That's a major international rally.
It was wonderful actually, because normally the Tulip rally, if you can think about it, it's Holland and it's flat and it's a nice, a lovely rally, and it's a few special stages and that sort of thing. But that particular year, it was slightly later, and they brought it into France, which they don't normally do out of Holland. But we went into France, and then it snowed, and it snowed, and it snowed, and it snowed. That little car has a rear engine, as you know, and the girl who was with me, we got to one of the hill climbs, and of course a lot of the cars, the front engine cars, they couldn't get up the mountains because they were just slipping and sliding, and the snow was about so deep. And my co-driver, Val Domleo, I said to her, get out and sit on the back of the thing, because it was rear engine, as I'm saying, and rear drive. But anyway, she got out and she sat on the bonnet, the boot lid, and she actually was hopping up and down, and we actually got to the top of the climb, and nobody else got there. So anyway, we went on and we won it outright, which when they got in touch with me later that at the last evening, and they said, you won the rally. And I said something beginning with an F, and, you know, because I was tired. It had been a hard rally, in fairness. But the one great memory I have of that is not of the rally, not of the car, but of Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, who were in Holland, in Noordwijk, where we started the rally, and they sent this most beautiful bouquet of flowers and the loveliest letter and one thing and another. And that was my memory of it. Now, when we came back, and of course Lord Roots was all over the moon, because this was this tiny little tin box that nobody really wanted to know about, because it was just a horrible little thing anyway. But the rapier was gone, it was old-fashioned. Then they brought the Alpine, then they had the Imp, and of course Peter Proctor and Peter Harper and Tiny Lewis, and these, they were what I call a rough driver. They were used to driving bigger engine, bigger cars, and they were trying to drive this little baby thing the same way as they drove the other cars. And I remember Nolan Garrett, who was the competition manager, and he used to say, now lads, you know, calm down, take it easy, take it easy. So me, being a lovely little docile little lady, said, oh yes, I'll take it easy. But it worked, because they blew them up, they put them off the road, they did this, that and the other. And at the end of the first year, I think we'd won 10 coup de dames and one thing and another, and the other lads had won nothing. So I kept my job, some of the others didn't.
Great stuff. Oh yeah, that's yourself and your co-driver.
That's Val Domleo. She was a wonderful girl, because when she got off the boot of the car, and it was freezing cold, and her hands were like that, I mean, they were literally, looking back on it, it was the most selfish thing that I did to make her do that, because, you know, if you get frostbite, it's like people climbing Mount Everest or wherever it is, you know, sometimes your hands just, they don't work ever again. And when Val got back in the car, and I said to her, you know, well, I didn't even say thank you. I sort of said, well, at least we got over the hill. She was just horrified, and she said, oh. rally. We're not here just to be nice little ones with blah, 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 blah. Anyway, she did forgive me, and she's still alive, thank heavens.
Very good.
That was the Tulip as well,
yes.
and that's the sort of weather we had. I mean, all this, it was deep snow, and a lot of it was sort of slushy snow, which at times is more difficult to drive on, because, you know, to get a car to keep going, sort of like this, and then you start to slide, and you start to slide again. But, you know, any of the girls in the room here who are thinking about rallying, or they do rally or anything, you must be totally dedicated to what you're doing. And I just went out to win. And I was criticised about this a number of times. They say, it's only a sport, you know, it's only a sport, you know. I said, no, it's not. If I'm being paid to do a job, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do my best to win, regardless of what happens. And remember, that was 65. I mean, you kids here, a lot of you weren't even born then, you weren't even thought of then. But, you know, and because I was a girl and in those days, and, you know, they just thought that, you know, why are you so, you know, determined to do this? And I said, because that's me. And even now, today, if I take on something, I run the driving school now for the transition year students. This I'm totally dedicated to, and this is what I'm doing. And I don't care what the government says, what anybody says, I'm still going ahead. And then you have somebody like the RSA, who, Noel Brett, and he's a very nice man, and he says to me things like, well, you know, you don't do all these exams, and you don't pass this, that, and the other. And I said, pardon? And he said, you have to do this, and you have to do that. I said, Noel, I have made my, you know, my thing over the years. I've, you know, and he says to me, well, if you want to keep going as you're going, he said, I can fine you €2,000 and I can put you in jail. I said, okay, try. I don't mind. But how dare you? I said, would you go down and say to Sonia Sullivan, you can't train the young runners because you haven't taken all these exams. She has proved herself so well, which I have done also. And, you know, I just couldn't believe it. So I won't do it. It's not that I can't do it. I think it's a total insult to what I have done here and for Ireland and everything else around the world. Sorry, I get on my high horse.
Good girl.
Oh my God.
Okay, we'll move on.
I like that one. Come back. I like that one. Go back.
Okay.
Let me tell you, this is actually, it's just recent. No, that's not recent. That's top. One of the motoring magazines about 10, well, after I had the little car, my own one restored, and one of the English magazines, I think it was Motorsport or Motoring News, something, and one of the nice journalists, very young guy, I mean, he didn't even know me. I think his grandmother told him that I used to rally or something. But when I had the car, hello, when I had the car restored, when the car was restored, we decided we would do a picture, that picture and the modern picture. And we were putting it in, and it was a competition. And it was exactly the same car, exactly the same stance. I was still quite slim, actually, a few years ago. And we put it in, and we'd say, what is the difference in these two photographs? And they were looking and saying, I don't know, but that says Roots Competition Department. Maybe the other one didn't say that, so they say that. And the answer was 40 years. And the editor of the magazine wouldn't do it. Oh. He said, no, they didn't. No, he wouldn't do it. Yeah. So, but I thought it was a shame because, I mean, it was totally against myself, let's be very honest, but it was just fun. And, you know, I don't care now. I'm old. I've had my life. I've had a wonderful life. And I was talking to Jim during dinner, and we were reminiscing because I haven't seen him for about 40 years. And we did the London-Sydney together, and we had the best of fun. And they were hard days because the cars weren't as good as they are nowadays, as well, you know. And things always were happening. Everything. My car in the London, Sydney, Lewis Cortina, you know, the pistons were. What did you tell me, Jim?
You had only 3 of what Roger had 4 of. She burnt the piston.
Anyway, so I had to, in my Lewis Cortina, I had to reverse over the carpet pass, and I tell you, after I think it was 53 kilometres this way, I still have a crick in my neck. But anyway, that's by the by. I think it's time Jim said something.
Oh no, we've got more to do yet.
You know, I don't even get paid for this.
Can you leave her standing on the car? I like that.
We've had more fun tonight because, as I say, I haven't seen Jim for a long while. And we've had, you know, reminiscing and the people we all knew and what we did and what we didn't do. And he was telling us he was on a control in the London-Mexico rally. And I had, of all things, a Maxi. Oh, lovely. And mine was orange and white stripes because it was actually, it was one of the sort of sponsored cars, and it was sponsored by the Evening Standard newspaper, and the stripes were about that size, orange and white, and then we had these white overalls, and oh, we were gorgeous. You've no idea what we were like. Anyway, and I think Jim was up in the Andes somewhere. This was from London to Mexico. It was a long way. What was it, Jim? About 17,000 miles or something. I mean, 17,000 miles. If somebody said to you now, will you go on a trip to somewhere and it'll be 17,000 miles? What would you say? Yes, so would I at this stage. But anyway, we got there and Jim was out of control, and he was just telling me tonight that we came into control anyway, and he was with this other person, and they were up on a sort of a bus thing or a thing, and they had, you have to have in a control, you have to have an in point and an out point. And I think we must have overshot the end point or something, but we had the bonnet up, and his mate, who is not a mate actually, and I'm not even going to mention names because you don't know.
He's a pompous prat.
Well, I wasn't going to quite say that, I was going to call him something else. But anyway, so he said, Jim went running down, and this man had said to him, they've come in over there, you know, the in point of the control. And Jim said, in the middle of outer wherever we were, yeah, down in the Andes somewhere, and it was really, really, it was very rugged. It was, you know, one special stage was 1,600 miles. One alone, 1,600. But anyway, so Jim gets off the back of the truck and he runs down and he looks where the car is, and he had these cones. So he picked up the cone and he ran behind the car and put the cone down. No, the other way around. Yeah. It was behind the car, so he picks it up and he puts it in front of the car. So, and this guy said, they're eliminated now because they came into the control. He said, no, they're not. Look, it's fine. There's no problem at all. But, you know, rallying in those days, it was hard, it was tough. The cars weren't great. You know, we had works cars and everything else, but you know, we had great fun. We had great fun. And I mean, the things, you know, you'd go in, and I remember going down to Monte Carlo one time on one of the events, and the BMCs, of course, the minis were far faster than the IMs. And we got so annoyed about it when we came to the end of the event anyway, and we were all parked along the place. And I said to, I don't know who it was, but I said, you know, let's do something. And it was on Paddy Hopkirk. And we went down and we took his wheels, we loosened all the wheel nuts. When Paddy came out to get into the car, the rally was over by the way, and he got into the car to drive off, and all the wheels fell off it. I don't think he ever forgave me. I'm sure he didn't. Well, I think he did. Now he's about 79 or something, so I think he has. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Do you know what? They always look the same. Yeah. Oh, isn't that pretty?
1966 Monty, yeah. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Isn't that gorgeous? Isn't that the most gorgeous? VPI 77, Lotus Cortina. It was assembled in Cork, and I had some gorgeous pictures taken down in Cork. And it was when they were putting it all together, and it was standing on the chassis of it. And I always remember it, and I'm looking for the photo. If anybody has a photograph of the assembly plant in Cork of the Ford, and I always remember, I thought it was gorgeous. I was standing there in a pink white check suit, and I had the short skirt and the long hair. Do you remember? No, you don't, you're too young. But when in the 60s you had the hair sort of twist out at the end, you know, all this long. Oh, I thought I was the bee's knees.
Sure
But
you were.
anyway, oh, I'm sure
You
it was,
were.
yeah. He's too young even to be my great-great-grandson or whatever it is. But no, does anybody, if they can find a photograph of the Lotus Cortina, it was VPI 77, and we're doing a documentary and we're also doing a book. And I'd love some photographs. Ford themselves don't have in the archives any of these photographs, which I think is such a pity. Sorry, Jim, you're on next. Oh, you're definitely on next.
We're actually blessed tonight. There's two people up here who competed in and finished the 1968 London-Sydney Rally, which is
But that's
the finish.
No, it wasn't. That was in Fremantle, in the race track,
Yeah.
before we started across the Nullarbor Desert.
Yeah, the
And
trotting track.
The trotting track, absolutely. I saw Jim trotting down there. Anyway.
Roger Clark.
That was the love of my life, Roger Clark. He didn't fancy me at all. The first rally I ever met him on was the Circuit of Ireland. His father owned a garage in Leicester, and he was driving a Renault something, and he was the car directly ahead of me. And I looked at him and I thought, oh, I like that. Have a bit of that. But anyway, I mean, he was a brilliant driver, as all of you know, and me and my little Mini trying to keep up with him. But anyway, I didn't, and I didn't, and I didn't, and I never did, unfortunately, which I would have loved to, but I didn't.
Good girl.
Oh my God. This was, would you believe, this is, you know, one of those, as they do nowadays, and long hair, and, you know, and the eyelashes are stuck on. Now, I always wore false eyelashes when I was rallying. And the reason being, can anybody tell me why? Because when I got very tired, now when we rallied, they were really long rallies. There was none of this driving for 8 hours and stopping for 8 hours, and we would go, say, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday. We'd stop Sunday night, and then we'd do Monday night and Tuesday. That was the safari rally. So I used to stick on the false eyelashes. So when I was getting really tired and sleepy, my eyes would start to close, and I'd see them down here. And boom! So I'm awake again. But without them, it would have been very difficult, because, you know, you get so tired. It's just unbelievable. And you're driving. Do you know that the average speed on the safari rally was 80 miles per hour? Average speed. And that was on gravel, dirt, mud, and if it rained, it was gumbo mud. And then you'd meet the elephants, and there would be pink elephants. And no, they really, they were, not on the wine, no. And but they'd roll into the mud, and then when they stand up, they start to dry off, and it went pink. And
Yes, dear.
Anybody would believe me except you. But so, and that was day, night. Anyway, this particular time, my co-driver, Pauline Gollick, she's wonderful. She lives in Bristol. We do a few events together still. But she was saying to me now, and this is about 3 o'clock in the morning, pitch dark, horrible, in the middle of East Africa. Now, I don't know whether you've been there or not, but it's quite scary. But anyway, we came down, and I saw this pink elephant walking across the road. So I stopped, and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, the elephant. And then, you know, a few miles on further, another pink elephant, stop. Rosie, what are you doing? I said, the elephant. So again, another about 20 miles on, same thing happened again. And I went, doop, doop. The elephant went, doop, doop. And so I said, no, I'm not going to be fooled this time. So I kept going. She said, stop! It was an elephant. It was an elephant. And we missed it by about that much. But, I mean, these are things, in those days, you wouldn't get that nowadays, because all the works people, I mean, they have helicopters, they have planes, they have this, they have that. We never had any of that sort of thing. We were left to our own devices, and we were told, you've got to get there, and you've got to get there, and you've got to get there. And we got there, sometimes. My beautiful people. Ah!
This is training for the 1968 London to Sydney. Okay. There you are.
I don't know where they get these photographs from.
There's more, there's more.
Oh, God. This is... No, that's not me talking. I promise, no, it's not. I'd have been... They brought us up to the army training camp up in Yorkshire. And we were there, I think it was for about 8 or 9 days. And we did all this sort of thing. We went kayaking, we went here, we went there, we climbed walls, we jumped over this, and we did this and that. Then I never saw these pictures. Can I have some of these copies afterwards?
You have them, you have them.
Brilliant. Not great for my book. But anyway, there was... Just stop. I'm joking, boys and girls, men and women, ladies and gentlemen. One time before I die, I think I might do a book. I might. I can't do it because I can't spell. So it's going to have to be somebody else who's going to do it for me. But, you know, they're funny stories. And one of the things they taught us there was, if we went into water, you had to go down slowly, and you get down, 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 and then halfway down, then you start opening the window, and then you let the water flow in, and that'll be fine. Then you can go out through the window and the other way. They told us all these things. And the other thing was, if we broke down in the snow and ice, don't have big heavy coats and that sort of thing. Have a few layers of newspapers or whatever it is, but cover your head. The most important part is in cold is to have your head covered, because that's where the heat goes out. So and then the other thing was going across the Nullarbor. If you broke down the Nullarbor, how do you get water if you run out of water? So you pull it, well, you're there in the desert, and then you dig a hole in the sand, and you have a tin, and you push it in the bottom of the hole, and then you have a piece of plastic, and you put the plastic, which they supplied us with, around this, and they put stones all the way around it. And then after a while, the condensation with the sun, I mean, the heat was extraordinary out there. Jim will tell you that anyway. He broke down in the middle of it many times. But anyway.
Yeah, but I mentally broke down.
Oh, well, no, I wouldn't.
The car was fine.
No, I'm only joking. But the condensation would drip down and drip into this can. And after, it would take a few hours, obviously, but at least you would have water to drink. And if you don't have water, when you're in the middle of a desert in this scorching sun, you're not going to survive. And the one thing that always amazed me was that in the desert, in the Nullarbor desert, we were coming along, and the next thing we saw a car, and it was just off the road, and they flagged us down and we stopped. And it was the car that Sterling Moss was one. There were 3 up in the car. I can't remember even what the car was. And I said, you know, can we help you in any way? And they said, Sterling, when they broke down, absolutely freaked out. He freaked out. Now, I mean, we, just, you know, women, mere women, we could cope with it. Sterling couldn't cope with it. He got out of the car and he ran away from the car. And the other 2, they had to run after him. They said, no, 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 no. And they said, where are you running to? Oh, and whatever. And they knocked him out. They actually took a swipe at him and they knocked him out. They had to, because for anybody in the midday sun to run out into the desert at 140 degrees, total stupidity. And I couldn't believe the man who'd raced so many Grand Prix races and was a wonderful driver you know, would be like that, that would do that. And he did. And when we came along, they had him under a little, they had an awning out of the side of the car, and they had him there, and they had him tied down on the ground. It's extraordinary, isn't it? But you think a man like that, who'd driven so many Grand Prix, he would have been mentally and every other way so tough, that'd be no problem. Sorry. I think I better go back. Ah, look, isn't that gorgeous? Oh, I love that. That's my London, Mexico car.
Do you remember that, Jim?
Yeah.
You do?
Is that the one you helped?
Yeah.
Good.
3 of us went in that car, and it was an Austin Maxi, which had only been brought out about, I'd say it was only, what was Jim, about a year old, was it at the time?
Yeah.
About that. And they weren't sure how it was going to go. And anyway, I was there, a girl called Alice Watson and Jeanette Ruro. 3 of us went in the car. When we left Wembley to go down to Dover to start, we did 5,000 kilometres around Europe, and then we went across to Rio, and then we had another 12,000 or whatever it was up the other side. Lord Stokes came down, and he was a little small little, you know, and he said, well ladies, you know, if we got as far as Dover, I'll be quite satisfied.
Bloody hell. Cheeky
I said,
stuff.
you little... No, I didn't. I was much too polite in those days. But that was in the Andes, and there were no filling stations, there was no anything else. They had to fly the drums of petrol in so that we could have petrol to continue. And we went right up, we were up over La Paz, we were 12,000 metres, no, not metres, feet up in the air. Very rarefied. We had, you know, oxygen, and we had all this sort of thing. And we were up on the top of it, and the fan belt broke in the little car. And we got out, and Tony Fall, and who was Tony Fall and
Jimmy Greaves.
Jimmy Greaves. And they stopped to help us. And we tried to, I mean, I know nothing about cars, but anyway, we got a fan belt on it. And when we turned around, Jeanette was fine. She was from Annemasse in France. I was fine. And then, where's Alice? Alice was from Scotland. And I said, where's Alice gone? And all I could see was this little, she's a tiny little girl. She was standing there, and all I could see was this little, she was literally covered with cactus flies. They were like a grasshopper. They were about that size, and they were all over, everywhere, head, face, ears, everything else. And I said, I was trying to knock them off her like this. And, you know, they were sucking her blood out, in other words. And I thought, oh, what am I going to do? I had a fire extinguisher, so I took the fire extinguisher. It was one of these. Yes, I did. And they fell off her. But she was stunned. I mean, she looked as if she had the worst case of measles that you've ever seen in your life. We put her into the back of the car, we strapped her into the car, and we started off, and we had to go right across. It was another 16 hours before we got down into La Paz, and we had to go down the mountainside. Now, when you got to the top of the pass, before you went into La Paz, you only could go on a Monday, you could go down, Tuesday you came up, Wednesday you went down, so on. So we had to be there before 12 midnight. We didn't get there before 12 midnight, we didn't get there at something like, say, 1:30. So they said, no, you cannot go through, you cannot go through. I said, we went straight through, and there was a wooden barrier. So we just, I shouldn't say we, I just crashed straight through it, started down the mountain, and it was about the size of Mall's Gap, you know, that size of a road, and went down and down and down and down and down, and I mean, it was really a long way. It was 70-odd K. But when we got down about 3/4 of the way down, because we started to meet the traffic which was coming up, and they were these great big trucks with all the lights across the top and the big horns and the, you know, all this sort of thing. And I said, I don't care. I had all the lights on, my finger on the horn, and I just kept going. And luckily, we didn't hit anything, they didn't hit anything. And we got down into La Paz, and anyway, they were waiting for us with the ambulance. took Alice off to the hospital, and I said, well, that's us, we're gone, we're out of the thing. Because she was unconscious the whole time. And so we went to bed, and that was the end of it. And then, like, we luckily had 24 hours off there. And about 2 hours before our outgoing time, there was a little knock on the door, and these guys from the hospital brought Alice in. And she had blown up like a balloon at this stage. She had no clothes, her rings were cut off, her watch was cut off, everything was cut off. And they brought her in, and they said she shouldn't really go on. She said, if I don't go on, you don't go on, we're not going to win. She was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. She died of cancer there recently, but she was just a wonderful person. And we strapped her into the back of the car, and we went right through Guatemala and all these funny places anyway. And we got to the end. And when we got 300 miles from the end of that event, it was a place, and I can't remember, unfortunately, out of Mexico City. And they were waiting for us to come in, all the rally cars. And we came in, and it was an Englishman who had this sugar plantation. And that was the end of the event as such. And we were meeting there, and there was a big banquet and all the rest of it. And I remember we walked in, and they had this wonderful swimming pool with all these gardenia heads all over the swimming pool, and they were all, I mean, it was just, I burst into tears that we'd got there. And I walked out, and Alice at this stage had sort of come to again, and Jeanette was fine. And I walked in, and Paddy Hopkirk came over and said, you've got here, full. And he knocked me into the swimming pool with all the gardenias. I was not impressed, I can tell you, in no way. Anyway, I'm stopping.
No, keep going, keep going. Well, it's London to Mexico again, same car.
Oh, is it?
Okay. There you go.
It was a lovely car, I loved it. I loved it. It was a really, you know, they said in the beginning it was just a tin box on wheels and all this sort of thing. It was one of the nicest cars to drive. Now, I don't know about the Land Crab. I never drove the Land Crab. But I'll tell you, the girls who drove the Land Crab, Jean Denton, and there were a few others, there were 3 girls and us. And when we were driving into Mexico City, and I think we were 7th overall or something, you know, it was a long, hard run. And when we were driving into Mexico City, and we were going to the Aztec Stadium, and they had all the police out, and all these people were all along the streets, and all this was wonderful. And it suddenly started to rain. And it rained and rained and rained. The police left us, the people left us, everything else. And Jean Denton, I'll never forget this now, she's dead, so I can, well, I'd say it anyway to her face. She passed us out as we were going into the Aztec Stadium, and she went in as if she was the winner. And I thought that was so unfair, I mean, she was way behind us. She was maybe 20th or something like that. But she just thought, well, I'm going to go in, and I'm going to go in first. So, anyway, that's it. Goodbye.
Oh.
Would you give Jim a chance? He came the whole way from England, and he's not getting... That's Alice on the right. You can see how tiny she is, and scrawny me, and Jeanette Rowland. She was a lovely girl. Is a lovely girl. I nearly killed her actually one time. Well, I drove for Porsche, and we did the. Can I go on?
Oh, please do, keep going.
We did the Geneva Rally, and I drove Porsche, and Paul O'Tovenen was in Porsche #1, and I was Porsche #2. And I never had such a fast car, and it was like a go-kart, except that it went, like, instead of doing about 80 miles an hour, we'd do 120. It was brilliant. And we were catching him on the last day, and Paula was winning the event, and I was 2nd overall. And we came down this mountain, and Jeanette kept saying to me, oh, be careful, be careful, be careful. And I said, well, yeah, be careful, I'm catching him, I'm not going to be. But we came down this road, 3 o'clock in the morning, and the notes read 100, sharp right or sharp left, whatever it was. And it was sharp right. And I went down on the brake, but there were no brakes. The brake just fell straight through to the floor. And I thought, oops. And she kept saying, slow, oh, slow, 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 slow. And the only, it flashed into my mind, I don't want to die actually tonight. So anyway, so I remember my dad saying to me, and anybody here, you young people here, if you get into problems, drop it down a gear, drop it down another gear, drop it down another gear. So I went sort of 6th to 4th to 2nd, slammed it into 1st. And then I yanked the handbrake and I spun it around, and the nose went into the cliff this side and the tail was over the edge here. And I got out to see that Jeanette was okay. And they had to, the cars coming down behind then had to go and take the tail of the car and bring it back around and put it against the cliff here, and then they could get by me here. And afterwards I said to her, I said, why were you so concerned? And she said, my friends, they were killed right here last year.
Uh-oh. Wow.
Yeah, so anyway, that's Jeanette, and she's lovely. Oh, God.
Mark 1 Escort, yeah. Yeah.
We see everybody, it was extraordinary in those days that rallies were for the plebs. I mean, any fool could rally, but you had to be a racing driver. So I said, right, so I'm going to be a racing driver. So I got this is Run Baby Run. No, it wasn't, it was Flower Power, I think, that one. And then I got Run Baby Run afterwards. And we did the British Saloon Car Championship, which I won 3 years on the trot. And I mean, I thought this was child's play. It's like driving a little go-kart, round and round and round and round. And I got totally bored with the whole thing. So I said, this is rubbish. At least with rally, you don't know what's around the next bend. There could be a cow or a person or whatever the case may be. So I did a few years racing, and then I thought, no, it's not for me. So I gave that up again.
Very good. No.
I don't even know what that is.
Irish land speed record, 1978.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah. Jag.
God, I didn't know it was red and white. There's a car, Mick Hill in England, he used to, we had a thing called superloons way back then. And it meant you could take any car and put any engine, you could put one in front and one in the back if you wanted, then one in the seat beside you if you wanted. But we decided, Danny Keeney used to ride motorcycles, and he had won, I think, something like 25 silver medals in the Isle of Man, racing motorcycles. He was brilliant to drive a car. Oh God almighty, it was like taking your life in your hands, it was dreadful. But he decided we'd do this land speed record down in Cork, the Carrigaline Straight, and we had to get a car that would be, you know, a bit quick. So we went to England, and anyway, Mick Hill, he had this car. It had a Formula 1 engine, but the difficulty, which I didn't know, was that the engine, though it was there, the drive shaft or something was here. Now, if the drive shaft had broken, I would have been decapitated anyway, because it was whizzing around here beside me, and I had no idea. I was just sitting in. I never drove the car until the morning we did this land speed record, which is crazy. I mean, there's no way, if you're going to do something seriously, that you're just going to, you know, do it on the day you're going to do it. It was, I flew down from the Donegal Rally, which finished on the Sunday night, and a friend of mine picked me up in a little tiny plane, flew down to Cork, and we were on the Carrigaline Straight at something like 5 a.m. And then I think we did it at 7 a.m. And what I didn't know was there was rich concrete, and you had to do it one way, and then you had to turn around and you had to come back, and they took the aggregate on this thing. But it had rich concrete, and I had this helmet on. I never sat in the car before. I didn't even know whether it had gears, but I assumed it had gears. And because you went, and the helmet came down, 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 and I sat here somewhere, and I tried to do this and push it up here. And, you know, how I'm here, I don't know. God, you're so good to me. Not too good to you lot. Anyway, no. Oh, my over the Scona. Well, it wasn't my over the Scona. Dealer over Team Ireland. Yeah, I see the back of it.
Yes.
No, that was the Circuit of Ireland, and we were, I think, flying about 7th overall. And I couldn't catch the people ahead of me, and it was the centenary year or one of these things. And people behind couldn't catch me. And, you know, if you've no pressure on you, It's very hard to concentrate. And there's, again, 3 o'clock in the morning. All these things happen between 3 and 4. That's your lowest ebb of concentration. And came up in Donegal and came up like this, and the road actually went sharp left. It's called Rosie's Bend, and of course I didn't go sharp left, I just went straight on, which was wonderful, and I landed on top of a rock on the road. But it didn't make any difference in the field. There were thousands of people around because they knew everybody used to go off at that stage. So anyway, they all came rushing up, lifted me out, and I mean, I still could have easily driven out of the field and back on the road again. But this man called John Tansey in Fiesta,
Chevette.
No, he wasn't, he was in an escort. And I could hear him coming, and I said to the lads, I knew that I could hear, he never lifted anywhere. I mean, how he even got as far as us, I don't know. And he just shot off, and he landed on the back of the car, the roof and the back end of the car. And I mean, to this day, he still keeps apologising. But anyway, that was us. We were out of the rally. And what annoyed me was that I had won this trophy called the Hughie O'Connor Rogue Trophy about 10 times. And the girl who didn't even finish, they gave her the trophy, and she still has it. And I thought that was bloody awful. So anyway. Oh dear Jesus Christ. Come on, turn it away. That's Cork.
Yeah.
That was
Cork
the open
20.
school again.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Oh, that's my school.
Yeah.
This is what I do now. Yeah. This is, yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to say something about it?
Yes.
Tell us something about it?
Yes. I run this school. I saw it in America. My sister lived in America most of her life, and all her children did driver's ed. And I just thought it was a wonderful idea to teach the young people before they ever go out on the road. But you must have, you know, land to do it. You must have roundabouts and stop signs and everything else. And I set up this school 16 years ago. It's going now. And we've been running it all over Ireland. It's been great. I mean, if you can even save one child, you know, I mean, this sounds a bit dramatic, but what I'm saying is, I think children must be given a chance, because the younger you are, think about the youngsters today, and they have all these little things, and the emails, and the this and the all this. I don't understand these things at all. I have one, I can press a button and everything goes black. But anyway, but kids can learn younger than, you know, the older people. And I think just to give them a chance, it would be a wonderful thing. But the government do not want to know. And they keep coming up with all this nonsense about, oh, you know, they've brought down all the road, you know, the accidents and all the rest of it. But our roads are wonderful now. I mean, if you're going to go off-road in France, in Germany, in Switzerland, you're going to come across the same little side roads as we have here in Ireland. The major roads. I mean, that Limerick, Dublin road, up Limerick, down to Waterford, down to Cork, down in. This is what we need. I mean, this is how, because you're going to bring, you know, the trucks have to come down. If they're going to do business in Ireland, you must have the infrastructure for them to get from A to B. And I think at long last they've done something about it. But it's not because the RSA have done something particularly. I mean, what does Gay Byrne know about driving? Oh my God.
I can promise Rosemary that when she does write her book that everyone in the room, I'm sure, will buy a copy. So I think this is probably a good point that we'll break for a cup of tea or coffee, but we won't break for too long because we have a lot more stories to be told yet. Okay, thank you for a moment. The next man that's going to speak to us is Mr. Jim Gavin. Jim went from doing the 1958 Circuit of Ireland in a Ford Consul to being the current president of the British Lawnmower Racing Association.
Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
In between those two things, he got up to a little bit of mischief, and he's going to share some of that with us now. Hopefully. When you're ready, Jim.
What?
When you're ready.
Oh yeah, okay. Listen, I'm going to try for a moment without this thing. Can you hear me at the back? Right, okay. I grew up in Roscommon. Now there was very little, there was no motorsport whatsoever in Roscommon. And for some reason or other, I thought I've got to get into the. I used to read the magazines and read about, you know, Stirling Moss winning and Paddy Hopkirk and Cecil Vard and Billy Bradshaw with an AC Bristol, which I thought was beautiful, and Kevin Sherry and these characters. But now Stirling was in racing, and I knew there was no racing anywhere near Roscommon. But once a car rally passed through in Mayo and Sligo, and I thought I can get in on that. But I didn't have a. I saw an advertisement for the Circuit of Ireland. I wrote away and I got a competition licence. It cost me £1 from the Royal Irish Automobile Club. Barney Manley was the president. He didn't mean, all he wanted was my name and address, and I got a competition licence. So I persuaded a chap called Billy Malloy, who owned a cinema in Castlereagh, to enter his Ford Consul, and I found the photograph the other day. And it's a normal Ford Consul, and it had, you know, a bench front seat, and no seat belts, 3-speed gearbox up there. But we modified it. We put a tiger on the back window shelf and its eyes lit up when you put the brakes on. So we did the Circuit of Ireland and we finished and we had a ball. And the only snag was, in those days, you stopped Saturday night, started up near Newtonards or Belfast or somewhere. And you went, and Saturday and Sunday nights were at the Great Southern Hotel in Killarney. And Billy came to me in Killarney when they used to put the positions up on the pillars in the reception area. And Billy came to me and he said, you know, I don't see any point in continuing on. We should be going home. Why is that? We're only 77th overall. And there were about 220 cars started the pesky thing. He thought he should be up front somewhere. So, and he was absolutely serious. So he went off to muttering to himself. And I saw Pat Moss in the bar with somebody else. She was with Anne Wisdom in a Morris Minor. And I didn't know her from, I knew who she was, but she certainly didn't know me. And I went to talk and said, excuse me, could you do me a favour? My name is so-and-so, and I'm in a Ford Consul. And she said, is it the one with the tiger whose eyes light up when you put the brakes on? And I said, yeah. She said, where can I get one of those? Anyway, I said, can you do me a favour? What's that? And I told her about this guy. It was the first rally I'd entered as a navigator. The first rally he'd entered as a driver. He wants to go home because he's only 77. She said, leave it to me. And I go off and have a drink, leave it to me. And about 45 minutes later, Billy, the driver, found me all excited. He said, guess what? Pat Moss came up to me to congratulate me, and weren't we doing so well for a bog standard Consul? So we went on and finished the rally. Anyway, that was my foot in the door. Now, from then on, Rosemary's career and mine were completely different. Rosemary was in to win, and God bless her cotton socks, she won an awful lot. I was in to compete and have a chuckle. I was more in the having fun side. And I progressed, I don't know if that's the right. I got into a bit of racing, a bit of rallying, a bit of everything. Even with Dennis Hogan, I rallied, we did a Circuit of Ireland later on. I don't think we won that either. But I then managed to get my way into a racing team in London, and I thought I'd go over as a mechanic. And I went and joined them for a year. I thought a year, and that'll get it out of my system, and I'll decide whether I want to stay in that game or not. And then I'll come back to Ireland after a year. And I had worked for Smiths of Cavan and Murphy and Gunn. And you remember Charlie Gunn was into rallying and racing too. So I went off and I had a ball in England. It was so good. You know, I'd never been out of Ireland, and within 2 or 3 weeks we went to Brands Hatch, Snetterton, Spa, the Nürburgring. I mean, the Nürburgring for a kid. As I said, I'd never been outside Ireland, and I was allowed to practice some of the cars. Now, admittedly, they weren't out racing cars, but they were MGBs, Morgans. What else did we have in those days? TVRs, the first E-Type Jaguars, all that sort of stuff. But then I'd had an international rally license and an international racing license. Again, they were easy to get in Ireland. You didn't have to do all the funny club racing. So up came the chance for the London-Sydney Marathon in 1968. I entered with a Scotsman, John McClay, an Englishman, Martin Maudling. So we had an Englishman, an Irishman and a Scotsman in this car rally. But we were doing an awful lot of work with Ford then. The race team I went to work for collapsed. We'd had a couple of bad crashes. So we formed our own rally team. It was called Supersport Engines Limited, but it was rallying Mark 1 Cortinas. But I took an Escort because I thought it would be more reliable than the Lotus Cortinas with the complex twin cam engines. And Rosemary was talking about her training, going to army camps and jumping up and down, and what we were exercising and what to do if you fell into deep water and all that, and if you got frozen. Our exercise was mainly in the saloon bar at the Victoria pub just off the back of Bayswater, and you'd be lifting elbows and talking. It was a kind of a motorsport hangout. And to give you an idea of how serious, well, not serious, our main aim was to finish, to get to Sydney. And we were in the place one night drinking, and this is just one of the little silly stories. And Martin Maudling said to me, Maclay, that's our third guy, has gone to the loo. Oh yeah. And he said, no, that's his third time in an hour. Why are you worried about that? Well, there's only room for 70 cars on the ship from Bombay to Australia, and there's over 100 cars starting this rally. Now, you and I have had the same amount of beer since we came in here, and we've not gone to the loo. He's gone 3 times in less than an hour. If we have to stop every 20 minutes between here and Bombay, that ship's going to be halfway across the Indian Ocean by the time we get there. So how do you pee in a car at 80 or 90 miles an hour? Martin did research, and he discovered that fighter pilots used a sort of hose device that came out underneath the aeroplane. If the ground mechanics didn't like him, they turned the hose around the other way. We thought, no, that's no good. And Martin said, we'll use freezer bags. What do you do with freezer bags? Well, they're little bags that you put whatever you want to freeze, and you tie a knot around it and you put it in the freezer. But with us, we'd carry a roll of them because they'd tear off, and you pee in the bag and chuck it out the window. So, oh my God. Well, we'd better practice. So John had a Daimler SP250. Do you remember those things? Daimler Darts with a V8 engine. Now the M4 motor, our workshop was in Acton, Supersport in Acton. And the Chiswick flyover was just down the road a few hundred yards. And the M4 section out to Reading had only just opened. There was very little traffic. This is nearly 50 years ago. So Act 1 was, I was driving this Daimler. Martin was beside me with a clipboard with 3 stopwatches. What the hell he wanted that for, I don't know. And John was sitting sideways in the back. Now, there's supposed to be a 4-seater car, but there ain't no way you can sit with your legs. So he was sitting sideways, all scrunched up. So we went out the motorway. This is a serious exercise. How do you pee in a car at 80 or 90 miles an hour? And John was not a happy bunny, but Martin was in charge of statistics, and I was in charge of the car, so he had to pee in the plastic bag, but he couldn't. And so we went off the motorway into the Master Robert Motel on the old A4, and we had 3 pints of beer each. In those days, drinking and driving didn't matter much. And we went back into the, Martin and I went to the loo. We wouldn't let John go. Back into the car. After the pints of beer, you're driving a lot faster. So now we had the thing up to around 100 going out the M4. And I was trying to turn the rearview mirror so I could see what he was doing. And he was kneeling on the back seat. And he wore glasses. So he had one hand out between us holding the top of the windscreen. This thing was open, this car. One hand holding glasses. And he was fumbling away with the experiment. And Martin said, my God, he's doing it. And instead of, I should have been looking in front, looking at the mirror, and a truck moved out into the lane in front. So we were now doing about 100. I hit the brakes hard. John came forward between the two of us and went in under the dashboard. The experiment was going on. I'm trying to get out that door, sit and keep my foot on the brake. Martin was leaning that way, and the plastic bag went way up in the, and I could just see it, and there was a little lad on a scooter going in on the lane. And the last I saw was I went left of the truck. I don't know what happened to the guy in the scooter, but any time Maclay wanted to pee on the way we stopped the car, and we still got on the ship. Now, that's the sort of we're not works team, you understand, but we made it onto the ship, and again, I remember it was only when Rosemary was talking about it. It was a P&O ship called the Chusan. And I think they put us all in first class. And the purser didn't take into account that there weren't an equal amount of men and women on the ship, certainly in first class, because there were about a dozen girls, navigators, or maybe hardly even a dozen. And the second night out, there was a dance. Well, what the heck? There was about a dozen girls and about 250 hairy rally drivers, mechanics, journalists. The queue for Rosemary went twice around the deck. Well, we did finish in Australia, and we then came home. I can't remember why. I shipped the car home. I then wanted to get involved in the London, Mexico, and this is a good lesson for anybody who wants to get into motorsport. And well, to get a job, my father had told me many years before, just stick your neck in and with a bit of luck and just put your nose in. I saw the announcement for the what was it? The Daily Mirror London, Mexico World Cup Rally. I didn't want to drive on it, but I wanted to be involved as a steward or do reconnaissance or anything. And I rang up John Sprinzel, who was one of the guys organising it, and said, hey, can I? And he said, oh, God, he said, we've had about 600 calls since this morning. And I thought, bugger. And then I thought, well, hang on. So I went to the RAC in Berkeley Square, Belgrave Square. The RAC club, beautiful old building. They're not there anymore. There's now the MSA out near Heathrow. And I went down into the basement, where I'd been a few times, where the big rallies were planned. And it was almost as big as this room. And there were maps all around the wall. And there was Tony Ambrose, Jack Sears, John Sprinzel, Jack Kemsley, all these names from that time, all sitting and answering telephones and planning things. And a phone rang, and somebody picked it up and said, it's whatever newspaper, they're trying to find out what's the total, I was just standing there, what's the total miles? We haven't worked it out yet. So I said, I'll work that out for you. How long will it take? They said, I'll have it, give me 3 hours. So they said, we'll call you back in 3.5 hours. He put the phone down. And I went round all the maps and started making up, and I get 16,500 miles. And they said, oh, that's great, good man. What are you doing tomorrow? I said, no, I'm here. He said, great. And I got a job. And about 2 months later, there was a landslide in Yugoslavia. The route had to be changed, and I went off with Logan Morrison. And we flew to Belgrade. We picked up 2 rental cars. We went down, we went up and down and changed the route around. And then we ran a control between Titograd and Cetinje over the mountains and down into Kotor. Then we went to Lisbon, and then we went to Rio. And I remember Rosemary in Rio because she wore a one-piece white bathing suit, which caused me great disturbance. And I then went on and went down to Buenos Aires and drove out and ran a control, the one she was talking about, where I moved the cone, the other side of the car, so that she was outside the control area. And then went on up to, the next one. I went to a place called Potosí to run a control. Potosí is an old Spanish mining place in Bolivia. And they say that if all the silver that the Spanish had taken from there was put together, they could build a bridge to Spain. It's at 16,500 feet. It was the highest all these drivers had to go. And I was to be flown up in a DC-3, belonged to the president of Bolivia. And when I got there, Jack Sears had arranged for me to have afternoon tea with the president, because Jack was going on, but he told the president that I was a very personal friend of Prince Michael of Kent, who was going on the event, and the president wanted to meet Prince Michael. I can bullshit my way through that, said I, but he said, we have a problem. The president has to give the final okay if we're keeping the frontier from Argentina open for 24 hours, and for the cars coming up north. So I met the president, and he was, Senior Gavin, he's wonderful to meet you, and how are you, and I would give you afternoon tea because you English. I didn't explain the subtlety between English and Irish. You English, you like afternoon tea, but at this altitude the water not boiled so good, so we have gin instead, and you English drink, so we drank gin. Then he said to me, he had his uniform on, he was Martinez, Professor Pablo de something de Martinez, and I kept calling him El Presidente. He liked that. And I gave him some stickers. Stickers are big in those days, especially. I don't know if there were stickers for the event, but there were stickers. He liked the stickers. He said, I now you introduce you to the senior most pilot in all of my Air Force. And a fella came in and he was beautiful. He was the classic Rockfist, Rogan, Biggles, everything you could imagine. He had a leather jacket. He had the fur-lined boots, and he had a moustache like that, and he was smoking a cigarillo like that, and he swayed it like that, you know. Hey, El Presidente, hiya, how are you? And he said, how do you do to me? And he told me he was going to drive. He started drinking gin, and then he left to go up to the airport to take the aeroplane out of the hangar for the following day. Now, we roll forward to the next morning, and I was to go to the airport to be flown in this DC-3 up to this Potosi place. And we'd been warned by the president and the pilot the day before. We have to go early because the air, when the sun comes up in the Andes, and this thing flops around a bit, and we're very, very high anyway, and all that stuff. So I went up there with the Daily Mirror photographer, who was namesake of mine. His name was Kent Gavin. And when we got there was nobody at the airport. Well, there were just a few cleaners and things. And there was no DC-3 that we could see, but there was a red Cessna single-seater parked outside the airport building. And we mooched around and found somebody, and they said, oh, that's your aeroplane. Well, where's the pilot? Well, he's gone back down to La Paz in the Lufthansa flight. I don't understand. He was told that the aeroplane you were to go on has broken its wing coming out of the hangar yesterday. The chief pilot had been on the sauce with us the afternoon before. And he frantically phoned La Paz and said, can you send up an aeroplane to take 2 people up to Potosi? They misunderstood and sent the aeroplane up, and the pilot went back down on the jet Lufthansa and left the air, so we have no pilot. So what do? We call the and this lot are all hurtling up through, you know, they're bouncing off mountain tops on the way up through Argentina, going like bats out of hell. We've got to get up to Potosi, to this control, at the end of your 1,600-mile whatever section. So Ken Gavin said, forget it, I'm not going in that thing. I was on one of the last planes, one of the first planes into Biafra that was shot at during the Nigerian Igbo War. And this is 1970. And I swore I'd never, ever, ever again fly in a plane that didn't have at the very least 2 engines. So I went off by myself. They found 2 pilots who used to fly a Constellation. You know those big Constellation with the 3 tails? And you wonder where these big airplanes all go. They're all down in South America. And they used to fly this thing and drop hay in the high pastures. They shove it out the door. So they flew me up there in the Cessna. Now, we got to Potosi, landed. It was rough, but we landed. A single-engine airplane does not like flying at about 17,000 feet. No oxygen or anything. It was fluffing about, but we got there. And they pushed off home with the airplane. So here I am with my control book and my clock, and the cars are due in about 12 hours. So I met the locals, and they said, you're in the little hotel, and it's in the presidential suite. And I said, has he come up here much? No, he's never been here, but if he ever does, he's got a presidential suite. How many rooms do you have? Oh, just the presidential suite. That's fine. And you could have a little, and where can we have as a control? There's a schoolhouse. And there was a little stone schoolhouse with a lavatory, I think, outside. And they gave me something to eat, and they didn't agree with me later that day. So now I am in, you know what I mean, when a lavatory with a wooden door and there's a gap at the bottom of the door. By the time most of these characters arrived, I was in the loo, and they were passing the road books in under the door. and they'd pass the book in, and I'd write down the time and stamp it and pass it out again. And they'd say, who's in there? It's Jim Gavin. What are you doing in there? Never mind, just go on. Piss off. Now, so that was that rally. What else happened after that? Oh, I then went off back to England when that thing finished. I went back from Panama City. And one of the nice things about the end, I was finished in Panama, and the rest of some of the other controllers went up up through Central America to Mexico City. I went back to England, and about 6 weeks later, I had a call from Dean Delamont, who was the boss of the RAC in those days. And he said, would I drive to Australia with Tony Ambrose to plan what was to be the next London Sydney. Of course it would. It's a job, you know, you get paid for it. Well, would I go? Off we went. I spent 3 or 4 days in jail in Iran on the way. That was another story. We were going through a small, we crossed from eastern Turkey into Iran, and before we got to Tabriz, we turned left and went up near the Russian frontier. And this was in the days when it was getting a bit dodgy for the Shah. And we were going through a small village, and some old boy stepped out in front, not in front of the car, but hit the side of the car, and he fell back, and he was very old, and he broke his leg. And there were cops and military around, and they stopped the car, and of course we had it full of maps and full of cameras, and they thought, uh-oh, this is no good. So they threw us in the slammer for 3 or 4 days. When we got out, we drove to Tehran, and they'd taken our passports. They'd checked all the money. I had a bottle of whiskey, and they said, in Farsi, what is that? And I said, lemonade. They said, oh, they took all that. Anyway, we got out by paying a bribe of exactly $600, which was what we had in cash, and the bottle of whiskey, and something else, I can't remember, cigarettes or cigars or something. We went to Tehran and called into the British consul. There wasn't an ambassador. And I said, look, here's the passports. There's nothing in that I can see about that we shouldn't leave. But they had muttered something about a court case. So he said, well, my best advice is you should go back and ask them. And we thought, sod that for a game of soldiers. So we got to the Afghan border and continued. At the Afghan border, Tony took the passports. He said, I'll go in. And I thought, God, have they put a stop on us? And he came back and he knocked on the window of the car. And we're just 2 blokes way out there. And I thought, shit. But I wound down the window, and he said, oh, they just want to see if we've got that tape recorder, taking it out of the country because it's in the passport for taking it in. So we were clear. We went to Bombay and flew home from there and left the car there. What happened after that? I came back. I then got into writing a few books and magazines, so that made a certain amount of money. Then I had a call from the RAC again. Would I go with Henry Lytton and go across the Sahara to Nigeria and back up the Eastern Sahara and up through Tunisia, Sicily, Italy, through the Corinth Canal to Greece, and come back and finish in the Olympic Stadium in Munich. And that was what was called the UDT London Sahara Munich Rally. And that took about 9 months. We did about 18,000 miles in, again, what was one of these, a Ford competition car that it used on the London, Mexico. Then we ran that event the following year, and it was a bit of a cock-up because on the reconnaissance, the tarmac finished about 400 miles north of a place called Tamanrasset. And the Algerians told us they were going to continue the tarmac. Oh yeah, that was one of the cars we used. And we put in the route notes, you know, we were doing Tulip notes. And we said, when you get to the finish of the tarmac, continue, go as far as possible on the tarmac, and then continue along whatever tracks you can find. But unfortunately, and this is kind of hard to explain, the tarmac was coming south like that. And there was a damn great mountain ahead here. So when we did the reconnaissance, the tarmac finished here. But by the time the cars came through, the tarmac had gone to here. And the proper route was still off the old end of the tarmac around this way. But the cars did what they were told. They got out here and they got stuck in, they had no idea where they were. And 24 hours late, 2 or 3 or 4 of the cars drifted through to Tamanrasset, which is in southern Algeria. And we stopped the rest of them. And the 3 or 4 we had passed, they continued on down into Nigeria. Henry followed them in. We had an aeroplane, a twin-engine thing out of Nairobi. And I stayed behind in Tamanrasset to stop the cars from going any further, the ones that drifted on. There were about 12 cars missing at that stage, but finally some of them had gone back to Europe. Some of them had just, 2 had abandoned the cars and gotten a lift on a truck back to the nearest airport and flown home and said to hell with the cars. We restarted when the ones came up from Nigeria back to Tamanrasset after about a week. They got together in a bunch and came to Henry and me and said, we're not going back up the Eastern Sahara unless you guarantee there's 2 or 3 Land Rovers following us. We had no following up to then, nobody following. So we found some Arabs and some local Land Rovers, and Henry went on chasing the rally in the aeroplane up to Tunisia. I set off in the Land Rovers, and after about 2 days came across Michael Taylor and Sterling Moss. Their Mercedes had broken, and finally got them to the airport at a place called Inamanis. They went on an airplane to London. I went on an airplane to Istanbul and continued with the rally. Now, the other bit I forgot in there was before we ran the actual event, we had a call from Russia, or the RAC had a call from Russia. Would we, instead of going from Istanbul into Yugoslavia, would we take the cars to eastern Turkey and bring them into Georgia and then up to Moscow and then out through Poland? And if we did that, they'd pay a load of money to the RAC, and they would let all the competitors have 3 nights free in Moscow and take them to the Kirov Ballet, the Bolshoi Ballet, and to the circus and everything. So I went off to Moscow and spent two weeks there, and they gave full permission to do it. And we rewrote the road book to go from Istanbul into eastern Turkey and then into Georgia and up to Moscow. 4 weeks before the actual rally ran, the RAC had a telex. This was in the days before faxes and modern communication. We had a telex from Russia saying, the entire world, the entire freedom-loving world has been shocked and horrified by the illegal and rotten and unjustified murder of President Allende, Salvador Allende in Chile. Therefore, you're denied all access to Russia. Go away and play with somebody else. So we had to rewrite all the book. Because the CIA were involved in the assassination of, well, they still say it was suicide, but I think he was shot in Chile. And the Russians got miffed because he was a Marxist, first elected Marxist president in the free world. And so we had to rewrite the road books. So this is all stuff behind the scenes. So how... Since then, I've been involved in most of those Monte Carlo Challenge things with Philip Young. I've done a whole bunch of stuff with the Classic Rally Association. You go off and do a recce, or you run controls, or you do route changes, stuff like that. I've been so damn lucky. Well, Rosie was luckier than me, but she was in a different level of the thing. But I've been paid to be involved in motorsport since 1970, and that's about it up to now. Oh, and I've got, at the moment, I've got a tour running in the Cotswolds in 3 weeks' time. 26 classic cars coming to Ireland in June and July. October we're doing one on the Isle of Wight. Next year is northern Spain, mostly in Paradors for 12 days. And towards the end of next year, from Las Vegas through Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona for 15 days. And it's all just, that one won't be all classic cars, but there'll be a few. We're trying to get Ford Mustangs, the old ones, you know, to do that. So that's my story up to date, and thank you for listening.
Ask you a question there. Do you want to break?
Put on a video?
What?
Put on a video.
Break or?
No, whatever. Whatever you say.
I'd just like to ask Jim a few questions.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
You might tell us a little bit about the time you nearly lost an escort in the Ganges.
Oh yeah. Tony Ambrose and I, we got out of jail in Iran, and we went to continued on through, where do you go after Iran? Oh, Afghanistan. It was a gorgeous country in those days. I mean, I liked the people, and the women didn't have any of those chador stuff at the time. We happened to be there on the king's birthday. The king was Muhammad somebody. And they said to us, would you like to see a Buzkashi game? What's a Buzkashi game? Well, it's a celebration we do every year at the King's birthday. It involves horses. And they took us to the following day, they took us to a plain just about 5 miles outside Afghanistan, a flat sand plain, like a huge football pitch, with some posts at that end and some posts down there. But there was a good half-mile between the two. And there were more horses than I've ever seen anywhere in my life. There must have been about 100 horsemen at that end and 100 horsemen at that end, and cooking fires and all sorts of stuff. And the object of the game, they put a dead goat in the middle. And the object of the game is for this lot to get the goat over their baseline, or that lot to get the dead goat over that baseline. The goat was lying on the ground with 4 legs in the air. I can't remember if his head was still on. And they said the game will start at 12 o'clock. They're not allowed knives or guns, but they're allowed to carry whips. And you want to see them. They had those, you know, whips that long, with the tied around here, stiff leather to here, and then thongs out here. And at 12 o'clock, somebody fired a bloody great gun. And this lot started off like the charge of the Light Brigade going for this lot. And that lot started off. And they met in the middle with the most horrendous crash. There were broken legs, there were horses dead, there were people falling off, they were whacking each other like that. I don't know where the goat was. But the game ended after about, it was 20 minutes, because it was a case of last man standing. So that was our introduction to the Buzkashi game. And if you ever read Alistair MacLean's book, Caravans, it's a novel about Afghanistan, and it tells you that. We went on over the Khyber Pass, like Rosemary talked about, into India, and we were planning a route now for what was to be another London to Sydney, but not straightforward from the Khyber Pass through Pakistan and down to Delhi and down to Bombay. This time we wanted to go further north from Delhi. So we were up around a place called Ambala, and the Ford Escort, this thing that you've been seeing, the one from the competition department, went on to 3 cylinders. And we had cylinder head gaskets on the back window shelf. Not a tiger whose eyes lit up, but we had lots of gaskets. So we thought, well, we'd pull the, you know, you pull a spark plug out, and when water comes out of where the spark plug should be, you know, it's a cylinder head gasket or something more serious. So we looked at the map. The maps aren't very good, but there was a map, a bridge shown on the map about 2 miles further north on the Ganges, across. And there was an old hill station called Dehradun, about 5 miles from the river on the other side. So we thought, that's what we'll do. When we got to the bridge, it wasn't a bridge. It was a raft, a sort of a raft, but it was a box like this table, about twice as deep. And the guy had 2 planks, and he would put ox carts up on it and take them across the Ganges. How did he get across? He had a steel rope across from one side on a pylon to the other side, and a pulley and a wire coming down to the boat. And he would put the box with a pointed front, and he would tie the rope onto from the pulley on there, and the boat would turn in such a way that the current would push the thing across the river. Would he take the car across? He didn't think the boat would take the car. But the locals, like anywhere you stop in India, they appear from nowhere. They arrived on their bicycles with their little white shirts. The kids came. There were people lighting fires. There were mummies feeding babies. There were people settling down. And he wasn't too sure about taking the car. We didn't think the car would get down as far as Delhi the way it has on 3 cylinders, and we didn't fancy changing a cylinder head out in the middle of nowhere, or a cylinder head gasket. But a chap stepped forward and he said he was speaking most excellent English. Could he be helping us? And we said yes. And he said, did we know Bradford? And we said, oh yes, we knew Bradford very well. Did he know the people who drove the buses? We knew everybody who did. His uncle drove a bus in Bradford. We said, was his name Singh, or was there something Patel or something? He translated, and the locals all pushed the car up on the thing. And we set off across the Ganges. Now, as of course the car was settling the boat down further into the water than any ox cart had ever done. So the more cracks around the edge, the water was seeping in. And by the time we got 3/4 of the way across, there was only about 6 inches left above water, and the thing grounded in about 4 feet. We are in 4 feet of water about 100 yards from the shore. So how do we get to the shore? So we jumped into the water. Tony stayed with the car. He said he had to look after the papers. I jumped into the water and waded ashore, and again Indians appeared. And we said, would it be possible to get transport from Dehradun, and we could tie a rope around this boat and drag it in to shallower water? And they said, oh yes. And they sent a young lad on a bicycle off, and that was great. 2 or 3 of them went off, and we said, how long do you think it'll take? About 2 hours. 2 hours, right. The transport was an elephant. An elephant came over the edge of the riverbank about 2 hours later with a young lad sitting on top of him, cross-legged, tapping his head with a piece of stick. The elephant saw the Ganges and thought, I usually only come here on my birthday, and trundled down into the water and rolled over and squirted water over everything, and the young lad was running around his tummy like a lumberjack going around a log, and that type of thing. And then the elephant came out and they said, now he'll have to eat. So he started eating, with his trunk, wet river grass, sticking it into his mouth. And finally we got the elephant backed up, but he didn't have 100 yards of rope. They only had about 20 or 30 yards of rope. But we managed to get around the thing and dragged in about 3 or 4, and the boat broke. We were still in 2 feet of water. So we had to shove the car off into 2 feet of water and haul it out. And the engine wouldn't start, not on 3 cylinders, and everything was wet. The starter motor was wet, and the whole thing was wet. So would the elephant tow us into Dehradun? So we tied the car up behind. We'd broken the rope into bits. We tied the elephant to the front of the car, to the kangaroo bar or whatever you tie it to. And he set off at about 2 miles an hour and towed us to Dehradun. And my only PS to that story is, if you ever do get towed by an elephant, especially one that's had lunch of wet river grass, try to get a much longer rope than we had. Because windscreen wipers, no matter what sort of Ford, do not cope with. Anyway, that's that story about the Ganges.
One of the great unsolved crimes of the last century, the destruction of parking meters on Acton High Street in 1965. Do you have anything you'd like to tell us?
I don't know where he got that story. I don't know where Colin that's, but it's a true story. For those of you that remember the Mark 1 GT Cortinas, they had McPherson struts, which was basically a spring and a shock absorber and a tube coming down like that. And then there was, what do we call them, stub axles sticking out like that, a sort of a plate like that. And then, a stub axle like that. See, this is a casting, and the wheel bearings and things go on there. And this is the McPherson strut. Now, on rallying, we discovered this used to bend. Yeah? It used to bend like that. So we used to try and make a plate that went between this and the strut. It was very difficult because we didn't have the tools to bend it. And we were looking at a parking meter one night, and we nicked it. And we cut a piece of it, and we cut it then down that way, and the piece fitted perfectly. So we marketed these strut reinforcing pieces made by Supersport Rally Team. I think we charged them £5 each or something like that. And the parking meters around Acton in those days, we must have taken about 20 of the bloody things. Yeah. But what do you do with the parking heads? Well, we took the money out of them and we gave it to the church or charities. Well, what do you expect me to say?
Can you tell us then about visiting the Taj Mahal? Can you share that with us?
The what?
The Taj Mahal.
About visiting it?
Yes.
Oh yeah. When Tony Ambrose left me in Delhi, he flew home, and when we were doing the 68 London-Sydney, we went roaring past the Taj Mahal. There was no time to stop. And I always thought, I'll see it. So here I am back in Delhi by myself. All I had to do was drive the car. It's about, 2,000 miles or 1,500 miles down to Bombay. So I stayed in Clark's Shiraz Hotel. I still have an ashtray and a coat hanger. In those days, you know, you nicked coat hangers. And they said in the hotel, oh, everybody says that moonlight is the time to see it, but really dawn too is beautiful because the sun comes up and it bathes the tops of the turrets in a golden yellow light. What time does it open? And it's a big door, big, huge wooden door, and a wall all around the thing. And they said, oh, 8 o'clock in the morning. And what time is dawn? About 6:30, 7. And I thought, right. So I paid my bill the night before, got in the car, the Ford Escort with a roof rack and 4 spare wheels on top with tyres, and drove out to the Taj in the dark at about 6 o'clock, I suppose. And I saw the door, and I drove around the side, and there's a wall about as high as that wall there. So I put the car up against the wall and climbed up on top of the car, jumped over the wall, dropped down inside with my camera, and spent an hour walking through the building. There no locks on the building or doors. You take your shoes off. It was stunning. And then walked back down inside the huge big wooden door where you come in and you look down that sort of canal type thing, a pond. And there's the town. And I sat here on the steps and watched the sun coming up and touching the thing, and took some stunning photographs that I still have. No people in the thing. And I sat there and I was totally entranced by it, and the story about the guy that had built this for his wife as a tomb and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, I was just giving myself a sigh and thinking, I've got to get up back over that wall. Bloody hell. I dropped down. Anyway, the door behind opened me, and 2 guys in uniform, Indian gentlemen, came in talking to each other, and they looked at me and said, what are you doing here? And I said, you bloody shut me in last night. And stormed out past them, round the corner, jumped in the car and drove off.
I think we might just wind on that note. That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Jim. Thank you. Just before I finish, we need to thank a few people. The main person we need to thank is the man here beside me, Martin Burke, who has brought order where there was chaos. So, and of course, we'll have to make a big round of applause for our 2 wonderful speakers, Rosemary Smith and Jim Gavin. We also need to thank Dennis Hogan, Eddie Fitzgerald, Sean O'Sullivan, Donny O'Connor, and Martin Murray especially. That's his wonderful mug down the end there, and it's hard to believe that one of these completed in 1977 is on the figure. Thanks, Martin. Okay. Also, everyone else who has listened to tonight's event, I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully you'll come back again. Thank you. Good night.
Did you finish, Jim?
Do you want a smack?
Yes, please.
Good girl.
You're on film.
I paid a chap at the door €5.
There's a lot of nice men here.
No, do you know who I mean? Jim stays with him.
Oh, Dennis.
Who's Dennis?
He was taking a photograph there a second ago.
But Dennis spoke the last time.
He did, yes.
He did. He did.
He did, yes.
He's going to speak now?
No.
Why?
Well, you see, all these people are here to hear you.
If we just...
Come on, we better start. It's
Yeah,
it's nearly 1:30 now. Come on.
Yeah, we better pick it up.
Hello everyone. I would like to welcome everyone here this evening.
That's not on.
Isn't it?
Thanks a million.
I waffle on.
No, you don't. You had them in the palm of your hand. Beautiful, fantastic, as always. Brilliant. You've a hard act to follow, don't you?
Not at all.
Wooden doors, and then, you know, when you go in there, you pay and all that stuff. There's the pond and there's the cash. And I drove around the corner, put the car up against the wall, and climbed up on the car and up on the tyres and went in over the wall with my camera. So I took my shoes off, went down. There's no gates on the top, and I walked into it and up and down, and I thought, wow. They didn't have anything like this in Roscommon. So I then went back and sat inside the steps of the main big wooden door. And I was looking down and I watched the sun coming up and touching the turrets and all that. Finally, around 8 o'clock, the doors opened. These two Indian chaps in uniform walked and said, "Oh my God, what are you doing here?" I said, "Bloody locked me in last night." I went out past them, round the corner, jumped into the car and rolled off.
Great stories to share with you all. There's a little bit of business first. As you can see on the screen, on Sunday the 26th of May, we'll be holding the 21st Limerick Classic Car Show, and just to note, it's a new venue at the Limerick Racecourse in Patrickswell. Also, we're going to hand around, Martin has a clipboard here, and we're going to hand it around, and if you weren't notified of tonight's event, but would like to be notified of future events, you might put your details on the form and we'll get it from you after. Now, the next man that's going to speak to us is...
Excellent. Very good. Huh? That was excellent. You sure? Excellent, yeah. Brilliant.
It's funny when you stand up, it's a bit kind of nervous. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard. It is hard to stand up to rolling stories.
Thanks for coming. Thank you.
That was super, Jim.
Brilliant.
That was really super. Brilliant. Great. Certainly wonderful.
Maybe we should do it all over again. Go back and try from... There you go. Excellent.
Yes.
We want to do more.
Joking. Is that a son? Is that a son you're racing at the moment?
No, don't have any children.
No, because there's a James Gavin in doing the Le Mans series at the moment.
Is there?
There is, yeah.
Yes. And there's an Oliver Gavin. Yeah.
I thought because I was in London around 64 to about 66. But I saw the last race in Crystal Palace.
Crystal Palace, yeah. That was a nice circuit.
But there was a friend of mine. He was. I don't know if you ever remember him. Alexander Racing Minis.
Yeah.
Do you ever remember those?
Who was that? Oh, yeah.
Alexander did the checkered flag on the roof.
Yeah.
Race with them.
Yeah.
And I used to go to the brands in there. But when I saw James Gavin there later, I said, "Cheers."
No. Different one.
Different one.
Yeah. No.
I'll give you a ring in a couple of weeks.
Hey, listen. This is one of these. Do you remember the twin engine single seater? Or do you? Lawrence had. Yeah, that's it. That's it. And I finally found this. And this is in the yard. 1 water temperature gauge.
It's been here now for time. I know you didn't mention the longboards.
We brought them twice to Charleville, to the agricultural show.
There's 68 London Sydney. I want to get the two people that completed 68 London Sydney to sign them. How are you, Sean? How are you doing?